Hey guys, thanks so much for checking out my show. I really appreciate it. Please click to subscribe. I'm actually in New York City right now. I'm in the back of a taxi. New York City is where today there was this announcement and press conference by the U.S. Attorney's Office and the FBI when it comes to this mafia connected illegal poker game scheme. And allegedly, there are victims that have lost tens of millions of dollars. I'm going to really explore the mafia connection in a second. I have a really, really interesting guest who can explain how the mafia is still very much alive in America and how the mafia is connected to this whole MBA betting scheme. This is actually a former mafia boss who is going to join me to talk about all of this in a second. But first, let me update you on the allegations involving these former NBA players and how they connect into this whole really massive operation that's been going on for years. Former NBA players like Chauncey Billups, who's currently the Portland Trailblazers head coach, and DeMond Jones, former Cleveland Cavaliers player and coach. They were charged with conspiracy to commit wire fraud and money laundering connected to the rigged poker games. 34 people in total were actually arrested. And this is according to the indictment. I'm going to read from this. The defendants had access to private information known by NBA players or NBA coaches that would likely affect the outcomes of games or players' performances, and they provided that information to other co-conspirators in exchange for either a flat fee or some sort of portion of the profits. One example of this, according to the indictment, is knowing that a star player like LeBron James was injured when the public actually had no idea. The FBI says that the NBA stars are what is being called face cards. That's the word they used, face cards, which the indictment says means that they used to bring in victims for the games because of their status and prestige. Basically, they would use their big names to bring people in. And this part was the most interesting to me at this press conference. They even used rigged shuffling machines, special contact lenses, and x ray machines in Vegas to rig the game.
The defendants used a variety of very sophisticated cheating technologies, some of which were provided by other defendants in exchange for a share of the profits from the scheme. For example, they used off-the-shelf shuffling machines that had been secretly altered in order to read the cards in the deck, predict which player at the table had the best poker hand, and relay that information to an off-site operator. The off-site operator sent the information via cell phone back to a co-conspirator at the table, and that person at the table was known as the quarterback. The quarterback then signaled secretly the information he had received from others to others at the table, and together they used that information in order to win their games and to cheat the victims. Defendants used other cheating technologies such as poker chip tray analyzers, which is a poker chip tray that secretly reads cards using a hidden camera, special contact lenses or eyeglasses that could read pre-marked cards, and an X-ray table that could read cards face down on the table. What you see depicted on the screen right now is an example of the X-ray table that reveals the cards. Although they are face down on the table, they can be read because of the X-ray technology.
So right now it's unclear how Billups and Jones actually became connected to the other defendants who are part of these mafia families. We only know what's in the indictment at this point. There's obviously still a lot more to learn. My guest today is Michael Franzese. He's a former Colombo family capo regime, which means a captain, skipper, or lieutenant. He had a leadership position in the mafia. Michael was very successful mafia member. At the height of his career, generated up to $8 million a week. Thank you, Michael, for talking with us. I'm curious, with this whole indictment that came out today, how do you think the mafia managed to get someone like the coach of the Portland Trailblazers involved in allegedly rigging poker games?
Well, I have to tell you, it's not difficult. All these people involved in professional and college sports, whether they be athletes, referees, coaches, you need to understand people that are in that business, the business of athletics and sports, they're very competitive. They gamble a lot. When I was on the street, I had 12, 13 bookmakers that were working with me. We had so many athletes and league personnel gambling with us all the time. So, they get themselves in trouble, they get in over their head. They don't realize sometimes that the bookmaker they're talking to is associated with organized crime. Eventually they get a visit because they're behind in payments, and then it's easy to start to have them work with you.
How do these sort of operations like work behind the scenes?
Well, when you say behind the scenes, if you got an athlete that's in trouble and he owes money and he's got no way to pay it off, but help, compromise the outcome of a game, well, then quite often he's going to go along because he doesn't have a choice. Sometimes it's intimidation. Sometimes they just want to make the money, so they'll join up with you, figuring, hey, they're not going to get in trouble. We'll never tell on them. We know how to run our operation. So they get involved in different ways, but usually it's because they're in trouble financially.
Are the mafia bosses not nervous that this is eventually going to leak out? I mean, once you start, involving, former players and coaches, and it just seems like at some point, someone's going to find out about this, like they did here.
Well, there's no question, when the operation gets to be the size of the amount of people involved in this, and there's 30 indictments now, I believe from what I'm seeing, it's the tip of the iceberg. I mean, they have one person there that's got over 3,000 tape recordings of different various people involved in this. So obviously, they either had an informant or an undercover operative working on this. And yeah, people are going to take a fall. Do the mob guys worry about it? They do to a degree, but listen, they're all about making money, many of them, and they do get sloppy. That's why people get caught and go to jail.
Do you think that maybe some of these defendants were already in debt to some of these members of the mafia that we've seen charged in the indictment? Like, in a way, do you think maybe like they were forced to participate?
No, no question that many of them fall in debt. You would not believe this. I use the Michael Jordan example because Michael, as we all know, it's no secret. He likes to gamble on everything. Is Michael a degenerate gambling with a real problem? He's a real gambler. He gambles at everything. But with Michael, he's got a competition problem because he's got enough money to overcome anything that he loses. So nobody's going to put him in a compromising position most of the time. I don't see that happening. But that's not the same with all these athletes. If you're making a couple of $1 million a year, you're not satisfied betting $500. You're going for the big ones. That's what happens. And before you know it, they're going to lose. And it happens many, many times. I'm no stranger to this. The reason that all the leagues recruited me back in 1995 to speak to professional athletes and college athletes eventually is because I had bookmakers and we had athletes gambling with us, and many of them we put in trouble.
And what would you tell them when you spoke to them?
Well, very simple. I'll give you an example. If there was a guy on a football team, I'm going to go back. I'm not going to mention names today, and he was into one of my bookmakers for 50,000. Right? Bookmaker would come to me and say, "Mike, he's in for 50,000. Should we cut him off?" I said, "Why would you cut him off? Let him get up to you 250, 300,000. All you're doing is putting an entry on a piece of paper, and then bring him to me, and then I'll sit him down and I'll tell him this is the facts of life. You're going to pay us, and if he doesn't have the money." You're a running back. First three times you get the ball, you put it on the ground. You do this for me consistently. I'll tell you how I'm going to make my money back. Because remember, it's never about winning or losing. It's always about the point spread. It's all about the spread. That's what it is. So if you can manipulate that spread over the course of a few games, you're going to make money.
Do guys ever come to you now or over the years that have gotten themselves into trouble or about to get in trouble and, come to you for advice?
All the time, because I'm still working with the leagues. This year alone, I've done a couple of colleges that I've done, many, and I've done over 300 universities, all the student athletes over the last 30 years. I'll tell you a frightening stat. I tell these student athletes, and they're graduating to the pros. As a matter of fact, now, as of yesterday, I believe, student athletes on the college level are now allowed to gamble on pro sports. They weren't allowed to do that until yesterday. The NCAA passed it. But, when I finished speaking to them, I would tell them, if you got a gambling problem, email me. I don't need to know your real name. I don't answer to the NCAA. I don't answer to your coaches. I'll keep it private because I want to help you. By the time, Brian, I get back to my hotel, I have emails from these young athletes struggling with a gambling problem. and they say it's me, it's my friend, it's my brother. You know how that goes.
Mm.
And so this is widespread. And now the more access you have to gambling, the more of a problem it's going to to involve. And that's what's happening. You can gamble everywhere now.
Yeah, I mean, gambling has always been around, but it seems like we're entering uncharted territory when it comes to like online gambling. I mean, it's so easy right now, and like, do we know how this is all going to turn out? Especially like for young people, like you mentioned.
It's going to be tough because remember this, back in the day, the state of New York went into legitimate legal gambling. They were gambling, it was called OTB, off-track betting, right? They came to me, a couple of policemen that I knew, and they said, "We're going to put you guys out of business now." I said, "Really? Watch what happens. You go to OTB, you have to give your credit card, you got to give cash, you got to put it down. They don't give credit. You got to pay them right then and there, right?" So what happens? Now they go to OTB, they lose their money. They don't have any money to put down legally, so they go to the bookmaker who gives them credit. They actually increased our business. The more you make it legal, the more you're putting money in pockets and people on the street because eventually they lose. And then they come to the bookmaker who's involved with organized crime many times. And that's when all these schemes start to happen.
Ah, interesting. It seems like all of the crime families were involved in this poker rigging scheme when they talked about it today. Your old family, the Colombo crime family, it was Genevieve's family, Gambino. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. Does that surprise you that, I mean, that it wasn't just one?
Well, actually, the Columbos were not involved. That's the only ones they haven't named. So I said, wow, my former guys, either they got really smart or they're not doing much right now because they were left out of this. But the other four family were involved. It's normally not like that. It's usually kept within a family, in most cases. So I was a little surprised when I saw how widespread that net was that they placed. So that is a little unusual. But guys are cooperating with one another. When there's money, people will work together. So it's not shocking, but it's a little bit abnormal. It's not the norm.
Are all of these mob families still very active? Because I guess when I think of the mob, I almost think of it like in the past mostly.
Brian, you're right because, back in my day, there wasn't a day that went by, certainly not a week that went by without, a lot of stories, the New York Post, the Daily News, the Times about one of us somewhere, right? Today, I read the New York papers every morning. Maybe every 6 months, you're going to read something. So what does that mean? Have they gone away? Absolutely not. They're not going to disappear in my lifetime. They've gotten smart after the whole Gotti thing when people, were becoming informants left to right and the feds were all over you. They just went undercover. They're trying to play it low key, which is the smart thing to do if you're going to be in that business. But it's alive and well. It's not going anywhere. Trust me. And gambling, prohibition, huge moneymaker for the mob, no question. But that lasted 10 to 11 years. Gas business, I was involved in, huge. That lasted, for me, 7 or 8 years, and then it went away. Gambling will never go away. It's always going to be there. And that's the main business of the mob. It's not drugs, not for Cosa Nostra in this country. It's gambling. And they're not going away, and they're the masters at it.
Do they get mad at you for being so outspoken now? I mean, do you ever hear anything?
Yeah, look, for the last 30 years, I've heard a little undercurrents here and there, and I get threats and all that stuff online. Most of it is just nonsense. But, look, I'm not pointing my finger at anyone in particular. Is it not common knowledge that organized crime is into gambling? So I'll talk about it. They don't like it, don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm sure they're not all cheering for me in that regard, but I'm not concerned with it.
So when you were in the mob, did you work like in mafia gambling operations at all, like sports betting? Did that ever come up?
Well, I had a territory and I had a number of bookmakers that worked under me, in both, mostly in sports, a lot of horse racing also. Because a bookmaker, any bookmaker that can carry a decent bet rather, they have to work with us. We're not going to let them work by themselves. And they want to work with us, because look, bookmakers give credit. They got to collect. We were good at collection, so we made sure they got their money. So they give us a piece of the action, and we protected them from other mob guys. So, they're always working with us and they're happy to do it.
Did you think you were going to get caught? Like, did
Well,
you wake up every day nervous? Like, what is that? What is that like?
Brian, I was so high profile. I mean, I was indicted 7 times. I went to trial 5 times. I knew eventually I was going to go down. I mean, I knew I wasn't Superman. You can only beat them so often. They were never going to let me go until they did get me for something. So, but it was so much a part of my life. It was just normal for me. I mean, remember, I grew up with it. My dad was a major figure, so it was just part of who I was.
So in the back of your mind, did you know like I'll be in prison one day?
Yeah, I totally believe that. I mean, I visited my father for over 20 years, so I knew, when I got involved in the life, it was going to eventually be me if I stayed in it. I just was hoping it wasn't that long, and I eventually got a 10-year sentence, and I did 8 years on the 10, which was the maximum.
And was it when you were in prison that you decided like I'm done? Like how did that come about?
It was, well, I met a young girl who's now my wife of 40 years, and I didn't want to put her through what I knew would be a short marriage because eventually I'm going to go to prison for a long time. So it was then that I realized, you know what, this life is in trouble. That RICO statute was devastating to the life. A lot of guys were becoming informants. They were giving away heavy time, 50 years, 100 years, 70 years. I was one of the youngest guys. They would have given me 100 years. Giuliani told me he was going to give me 100 years if he convicted me on a case he indicted me on. Fortunately, I was acquitted. But I knew it was a matter of a time. So I said, I got to try to make a break. And basically, that's what happened.
Did you meet your wife after prison?
No, I met her before. I met her before. She was 20 years old. I met her on the set of a movie. I was producing a film in South Florida. And we actually got married a year and a half later in July of 1985. And I went off to prison in December of 85. So we were only
Okay.
married 4 months. Yeah.
Where I'm from South Florida. I live in Fort Lauderdale. That's where my
Oh,
home is. Where were
well,
you
I was in Delray Beach at the time, but I love South Florida. I love
at?
it.
There's
Yeah.
some like kind of old mob spots down there, you
Oh,
know?
yeah. Well, I had a big gas operation down there.
Did you?
Oh yeah, yeah, I loved it. I still love it. I go down there quite a bit.
So you met your wife, you said a year before you went to prison?
It was 18 months actually.
And then you were in for 8 years, did you
I
say?
did 8 years. Yeah.
And so did you guys stay together for all that time?
Oh yeah, yeah. We're married 40 years now. Yeah,
So you were married before you went in?
yeah. 4 months before.
Wow. And so where were you in prison?
Well, I was in the federal system, so they had me all over the country, but I did most of my time in Terminal Island in California, Lompoc, California. But when the feds were mad at me, they were trying to make a witness out of me after I walked away. They would put me on diesel therapy and they had me all over the country in different prisons. And then they kept me in solitary for 3 years. So they gave me a really hard time, but you get through it.
So how did they get informants into it? You mentioned informants. How did they get him into a mafia operation?
Well, I mean, look, informants, they get from within. Guy gets in trouble, they lock him up. They tell him you're facing 100 years unless you cooperate with us. And sometimes they'll put him back on the street, wire him up, and they're informants. We've had cases like that in my own family in the Columbos, Greg Scarpa, a number of guys. Other times they'll get undercover operations. I had a big undercover operation on me with Donald King, with Don King rather. They were trying to show organized crime's infiltration into pro boxing. So I had an undercover operation with me, and it was an undercover FBI agent who posed as a wealthy former drug dealer that wanted to get into the business.
And you said they tried to make you an informant?
Oh yeah, they tried. I mean, they wanted me to cooperate in a number of cases because when I walked away, you can't walk away from that life, Brian. When I walked away, I mean, my father was upset with me, contract on my life. Everybody thought I was going to become this major witness. So, the feds came into prison. They said, "You're a dead man anyway. We're hearing it from all of our informants. You may as well cooperate with us. We'll put you in a program." But I didn't want to do that. I wasn't looking to hurt anybody. I just wanted out. So, but they gave me a really hard time. They figured, that I would fold because I had a lot of pressure on me. But fortunately, I was able to get through it.
It wasn't tempting with your wife out on the outside and just, the horror of prison?
Oh, it was very testing. I mean, we had a rough, several years, and it was even rough when I got home because I had a rough parole time. They were all over me when I was on parole, and I still had people mad at me, and it took me years before things really calmed down in my life.
So back to these indictments from today. I mean, you mentioned you think it's much bigger. How much bigger do you think it is?
Well, again, they arrested 30 people. Some of these people are going to talk. They're going to name other people. This will get as big as the feds want it to go. I really mean that. Again, because when you have a lot of people involved like this, they're going to start making deals. They're going to start talking. They're going to see who else might be implicated. They're going to, and this thing can go on for again as long as the feds want it to go on because this is something that has never not gone on. I mean, this is part of organized crime life. It's part of a gambler's life. It's part of an athlete's life. So it's not going to end. You know, what's surprising here is this whole poker card operation that they had, how sophisticated it was. Because now with all the technology, you know, the way they have these card shufflers marked, they have tables that are rigged with, a not an ultrasound or something that they can read the cards when you place them down on the table. You know, you get a legitimate guy in there and you get three or four other guys that you're luring him in, you know, just to catch his money. You can make a ton of money. No
Yeah, I mean
question.
they said X-ray machines and like special eyeglasses and special contact lenses. Like it's almost
Exactly.
like James Bond shit. You know what I mean? Like
Exactly. You could
so
read the cards. You could read the cards if you have these special contact lenses on. I mean, how are you going to beat that?
so how do they like with the X-ray machine and the special like you said the different shufflers, how do they get those in like no one in there's not someone in the casino that notices that's on the outside?
Well, the sounds here, they had their own operation set up. They brought them into card rooms that they had set up already. It
Okay.
wasn't like going to a Vegas casino. They had their own spot. And it's easy. You know, you get a guy like Chauncey Billups, we can name him because he's in it. People are attracted to him. So he says, hey, you know, I like to play poker a little bit. They find their mark. They know the guy plays, and they bring him into a rigged room and they have four guys sitting down or five guys sitting down. Well, the other four are in on the scheme, but the new guy, he doesn't know. And he's sitting down with Chauncey Billups, or, you know, with another big name, and he's having a blast. And before you know it, he's losing plenty of money.
Is there any chance you think that these NBA guys could come in, their defense could be like, we didn't really know the full extent of what was going on? And could they maybe have not known?
Well, no, they knew. I mean, from what I'm seeing here, they absolutely knew. There's no question. I mean, there was one player I see if you I forget his name, but this is another scheme. He told his colleague, he says, "Listen, I'm going to go out on an injury early on in the game, so bet the under on the
Yeah.
game."
Yeah.
Because he was a big force, his name. So, you know, things like that happen, Brian. They happen quite often. You got a referee, right? Referee, he needs a little bit. Let's take basketball because it's easy. You only got five guys. You take a referee, he needs a little bit more money at Christmas. God forbid one of his kids needs an operation. He's got to make a few bucks. You know, an NBA referee can call a foul whenever they move down the court, or he can miss a foul if he wants to. So all he wants to do is manipulate the spread. You know, so he bets the under. We'll go back so we don't name anybody. The Lakers are playing another team. Kobe Bryant, major scorer. They give him a few extra fouls. They keep him on the bench a little bit longer. That's how they manipulate the score.
So yeah, with these informants, thousands of hours of tapes, they wear, equipment and everything and a mic. Like how do you think they went undetected?
Brian, that equipment that they wear, it's smaller than the button on your shirt. You can That's how high tech this is. I know because I had informants on me back then. And one guy had a little thing in his baseball cap that I never saw it. And he had a number of tapes recordings on me. It's so sophisticated, the technology, you don't know. And these 3,000 recordings that he has over a period of time. He's
Hmm.
talking to all different people, all different. He's getting text messages and getting recordings, and you got somebody sitting in a van or someplace else, and they're taking all of this down. So you don't know. Like I said, I had an undercover operation on me for almost a year. I didn't know who these guys were. I had no idea. They posed right. Donnie Brasco, 6 years undercover, FBI guy, right? 6 years. If you play it right, people are not going to know who you are. They're not going to detect you.
You never suspected it?
Well, let me say this: the investigation didn't go anywhere, so they couldn't implicate me in anything. I was just brought up by my dad to be careful, and when I didn't know somebody, I was very careful how I spoke. So I was prepared. Thank God I had good schooling from my father. But could I absolutely say they were informants? No. I just didn't know too much about their background, so I was careful. But I couldn't have said, "Hey, you're an informant." If that was the case, I wouldn't have stayed with them. So I didn't know. I didn't know.